Greetings. I'm Suzanne Titcomar. I used to write for a place called Pathos. I wrote a daily column called No Longer Quivering that involved the quiverful evangelical town movement, the whole non-denominational thing that many of them are doing that has gotten so squirrely in past years. It has gotten squirrelier than anything I've seen in a long time. Um, the people I'm going to talk about today, don't give them any grief at all. Please do not threaten them. Do not harass them. I know you guys won't. You're not even rude to each other, much less some of these people. I need to talk about a couple of things today. Number one, I just got back from the doctor. I got stitches out of my hairline. I got my ear looked at. I do not have a ripped earlobe like I thought, but I sure did take my earring off like I did. I merely have a pulled muscle in my back causing all my arm pain, and my knees are healing. So I am thankful, hallelujah, this morning. But at the same time, I've been having such a rough week because of the falls and because of interpersonal dramas with the person that my husband got to be our house sitter this time. I just got back from the States after 3 weeks, and some things went haywire, and then other people inserted themselves in it. It went more haywire. So one of the things that I'm doing right now is rereading this after talking to my doctor today. I showed at the doctor's office. I had a blood pressure of 160 over 80. Not optimum, but it's because of the interpersonal drama and things that have been going on, and the fact that my own personal boundaries have been pushed yet again. So I'm rereading this. This has got to be one of the best books I've read on rewiring your mind when you get in these thought loops, these negative thought loops, like, what's wrong with me that they're doing this? Or what's wrong with me that X, Y, and Z is happening around me? This reframes all of that. And I love this book. So every now and then I have to go back and reread it and just soak in the lessons. It's a good one. I also spent this morning talking to Cindy Kunzman for a number of reasons, mostly because we were talking about our mothers and some of our relationship issues that play into the things I'm dealing with here. So that was good. And we came to some consensus about some people we know and their various likely psychiatric things, which I'm not going to go into because I am not a fan of armchair diagnosing anybody. This has been a hot mess of a couple of weeks for so many people without having to fall down airplane steps and without having pushy people that have no idea where your boundaries are. Just take all that away. And it's still been a rough couple of weeks because of the documentary series Happy Shiny People that was on Amazon. It was about Bill Gothard, the ATI IBLP, and the Duggar family, but not just about the Duggars, but they showed so many, and it's been triggering to so many people I know, including myself. So I've just been kind of sitting back here hugging myself, even before I fell down the airplane steps. Um, and it's just been a hard time, which means I don't know about you guys, but I'm reacting in ways I never have before to stress and drama and various other things. So I'm just kind of like going, nope, I'm noping out. I'm reading this book and I'm looking at people who I know are problematic and have issues, and I know they have psychiatric issues. I just don't know what they are, but I'm sure there's a drug with a long name that big pharma wants them to take for whatever it is going on. So there you go. In the middle of this trumps Lori Alexander of The Transformed Wife. That's her blog, that's her book. It's I used to write about her all the time over at No Longer Quivering. Why? Because she was one of the most consistent and consistently just almost downright evil people in the quiverful movement, that if there was a wrong stance to take on anything, Lori would find a way to take it. And this week, Lori has done a really bad one. I was going to read you the one, but every time I try to minimize my stupid camera and read this, it all shuts down, so I'm not going to. I'm going to link to it in the description below. It's all over the place. It's at Fundy Snark on Reddit. It's on a bunch of different it's on a bunch of different sites, not so much with YouTube, but with I've seen it over at Twitter. I've seen it on Facebook. I've seen this stupid thing all over the place. A lady had written Lori who said that her husband had wanted to have marital relations with her one night, but she had too much going on. She was not feeling well. She had a huge handful of responsibility. She was exhausted. So she said, "No, I'm not having marital relations with you, not at all." And that is absolutely her right. Consent is a beautiful thing. That's all I'm going to say. And sometimes good things come to he who waits or she who waits. So, Lori wrote about this. Apparently, the woman woke up after she'd gone to sleep, and her husband was doing the dirty deed with her while she was asleep. There's a word to describe that, and it starts with an R. I'm going to throw that out there. You cannot consent to marital relations if you are asleep. You can't. The law recognizes that that is not a state of consent. You can't consent when you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. You can't consent when you're asleep. You can't consent if you have various intellectual difficulties. There's got to be those circumstances where you really can't consent, and sleep is one of those. The law recognizes that sex that takes place when you're asleep is the R word, and it really is. So Lori, to paraphrase her, wrote a little piece where she said she was so glad that this lady reached out to her instead of all of us loose Jezebels out there running around giving out bad advice, because we would have told her it was the R word and she needed to go to the police. I don't know that she would have necessarily had to go to the police right away. I mean, I'm just going to throw this out because this is one of those things with Quiverful and with all these people that I'm always just fascinated why they can't think of this first. Why don't you talk to each other? If you didn't talk to each other during the sexual refusal, we wouldn't be here now. Likely he would have said, "Oh, okay." Or you could have said, "Hey, I'm exhausted. I'm not really up to having full on around the world fun, but how about I do X, Y, or Z just to help you out so you can sleep?" Or it could have been, "No way, man." And any number of things, but with actual discussion wrapped around it. And if you call your husband doing this to you, it really behooves you to have a conversation with about that too. It's not necessarily all black and white like they try to claim. With all of these female cultural enforcers of Quiverful, they try to claim everything's black, white. It's R or not R. Well, it's definitely R. But is it the kind of R that you're going to blow up your entire relationship with? Or are you going to say, "Hey, if you ever do that to me, ever, ever, ever again, I will turn you in for R, but I will also," or worse. Consent is sexy. Non-consent is not sexy. It's just not consent. It's R. But at the same time, for goodness sake, just talk to each other. Talk to each other first before you do any of these things. Anything less than actually having a conversation with your spouse about this stuff way in advance is just a waste of time. You have to iron out these things before you even get married, usually. I mean, I threw my bona fides out before I married my husband and said, "Can't do this, this, this. If you try to do this, I will pack my case and go," because that's how I am wired. I know where my lines are and my boundaries. The problem with Quiverful and with a lot of these, like I call them, taco churches, is that these tacos, is they don't have a clue what a line is. They think there's no such thing as boundaries. Well, let me tell you, there are boundaries. There are boundaries. There are good boundaries. There are good boundaries to have. There's also boundaries when it does not pay to get worked up about it. You're kind of like, whatever. And I'm not saying that this circumstance is one of those. Actually, I think it's a pretty serious one. But at the same time, you have all these internet Christian cultural enforcers. They're giving out advice that's actually not just not loving or not like Jesus. It's actually illegal. Calling it not R, in my opinion, is giving out some very bad marital advice and is setting these people up for all kinds of problems in the future. Because if there's anything I know, it's that if somebody disrespects you once or twice and you say something to them about it, or even if you don't say anything to them about it, mostly if you don't say anything to them about it, but even if you say something about it, they are very likely to keep crossing the border, pushing the boundary until you're forced to take a drastic action. There are just those people out there. I, right now, am in the grip of one of them. And I have had to state what my boundaries were, where my limits were, and tell this person to back off in a hard way. And I had to go at it by a not a legal threat, a criminal threat. Let's just put that out there. That was how I dealt with this thing. Because that's how I roll. If you try to cross my boundary and try to push it too many times, I will eventually take serious action. I am reading this so that I can get to that point a lot sooner now. I'm working on this. I'm imperfect about my boundaries after having come out of so many years of this nonsense. And that's what I call a lot of this now. It's just absolute nonsense. It's not at all what Jesus said. It's taking a whole bunch of scriptures out of context and just kind of throwing them in the air and then making something out of it. So this isn't really even about Lori. But I also wanted to talk just a hair about her husband Ken, because I keep seeing stuff at both Reddit and other places about Ken. Ken's this, Ken's that. Well, Ken is married to Lori. Make whatever kind of leap of logic you want out of that. He's married to Lori. He has to put up with Lori. Lori and her bad ideas, Lori and her toxic ideas all the time. And I don't think it's one of those marriages where he's in control. I think she's the cart that's driving the horse, even though she's trying to say she's completely and fully submitted. I just don't see it by anything she says, anything she does. I don't see it. And what I do see is that somebody running around behind a woman who is significantly impaired in some way, and I don't want to speculate on what that would be. But he is like, how can I describe this? I was thinking about last night with Alice in Wonderland painting the roses red. He's trying to make the world that he needs to make to live with her in peace, whatever that means. And I'm convinced of it. Everybody on Reddit keeps saying, oh, he had an affair. I don't believe that either. I don't believe that Ken Alexander has ever had an affair. I'm going to defend him here for that. I feel kind of sorry for the guy myself, because it can't have been easy to be married to Lori all these years when Lori is just black and white thinking. And I keep talking about there's not always black and white thinking. Sometimes there's gray. Sometimes it's dark gray. Sometimes it's light gray. But sometimes there is gray. And I just see Ken as somebody who's trying to survive everything. Survive and get to the end of it. And that's a miserable way to live. I feel sorry for him. Now, I've said before, he's tried to contact my husband. That didn't go well. My husband's kind of like, I don't know who this idiot is, but deal with him. I'm going to bed. And why? Because I used to talk about Lori's theology on No Longer Quivering, including this theology that there's no such thing as R in marriage. There is definitely R in marriage. And what this young lady went through is essay in its own way. And it's wrong. The question then becomes, what do? Do you take one of these black or white solutions, Or is there a gray solution? Do you haul him to marriage counseling? Do you do something like talk to him? God forbid. You don't do that in Quiverful. You don't talk to your husband. You don't communicate, which blows my mind because that's the easiest way to resolve issues is to talk to the other person. Lord knows I had to call up my husband last night and rant about my situation and talk to him about it. And that's normal because you're supposed to be the two of you against the world as far as you're supposed to be each other's primary heroes. And in that regards, I cannot throw rocks at Ken. He is supporting his wife. Now, he's supporting her in her wrongness, but he is supporting her. It'd be a whole lot better if he would just take her in to be evaluated and insist that she seek treatment, insist that she take the psychiatric drugs, than whatever it is they're going through now. Just my opinion. And I would wish that for others too. I just know so many people in the church, and I'm going to say even here locally, the local church, I know so many of them that are just clearly mentally ill who are just running around doing stuff and saying stuff that isn't even slightly what Jesus would have come up with. And I'm looking at him like, and there's just so much dysfunction out there these days, and I don't really have a clue why that is, why we're having more than ever. Now, I know that at a taco, they would tell you it's because everybody is so selfish. Nobody turns to Jesus or God anymore. I dispute that. I don't think that's the case at all. Is it a combination of things? Probably. But religious fundamentalism isn't helping at all, I'm sure. I'm sure of that. Religious fundamentalism, the white nationalism that has taken over evangelical town is just, it's a heinous thing. And I think if anybody becomes completely obsessed with things, they end up in some weird places. I know I have in the past. And I have at various times myself. So I know how easy it is to slip and make that mistake. I wish Alexander's health and happiness, but health and happiness far, far away from the internet. I don't think the internet is a healthy, good thing for some people. And speaking of healthy, good things and the internet, have you been watching the fallout from Amazon's Shiny Happy People? The documentary involving Bill Gothard, the IBLP, ATI, the Duggars, and a whole pile of others from Evangelical Town. I've been watching the videos and just laughing at the verklimping I'm seeing of those cultural enforcer Christians that I've seen trying to push their narrative that were used as part of the documentary. Paul and Morgan, Bethany Beal, just to name a few. Bethany Baird Beal, let's put that's her proper name. Triple B. Those are two that come to mind right offhand, but there were others that I saw that were upset by how they were portrayed. And I just laughed because they weren't really portrayed poorly, I didn't think. I thought they were portrayed in what seems to be a truthful light, at least to those of us who have left. We have left the confines of the town. Those of us that have escaped from evangelical town are looking at this going, yeah, they got you right on the money, right where you live, what your theology is, and the whole 9 yards. And I think that a lot of times these people aren't able to see themselves as they come across to the world. They think that the world should be praising them, laying prizes and adulation at their feet, and they flip out when they get even the slightest bit of pushback, much less death threat level pushback that some of us have dealt with in the past. So I just find it very funny that they can handle no pushback whatsoever. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Well, if that was literally true, you would be a whole lot different in how you handle people. and how you react to people say, hey, I don't agree with you, you would react in a different fashion. So these last couple of weeks have been hard because of the documentary series too, because a lot of us have really super been triggered. I was triggered, but not nearly as much as some of my friends were. Some of them, I just really felt really sorry for them. They were telling me some of the things that they were going through and some of the intrusive thoughts, some of the places they were put back to, and it was pretty bad for a lot of people. It was not quite as bad for me. Quite frankly, I was more triggered by falling down the staircase at the airline than I was by this, and about and much more traumatized by the house sitter drama. I finally spoke up and told off the person yesterday. I finally didn't, because I was thinking they were just too crazy. I was just going to go like this. They had my face yesterday, and I just unloaded. I didn't give one of these. And I know I probably offended the person, but I'm kind of like, I don't care. I don't care. So that's one of those wonderful things. You have to decide where your boundaries are. When you're a member of a taco type church, they want you to have boundaries. They can't control you or manipulate you if you have boundaries. And that's the same way in real life when you run across awful people that want to continue to manipulate you. They will push at your boundaries, and if you say, stop, they say, I was just trying to help you. I'm just trying to be helpful. Don't blame me. Look, don't even entertain that. Leave the dust of those people behind you because they are only interested in manipulating you. That is it. That is it. And I'm saying that from the position, my family position of where I've been. My father was a family truth teller. He was the one that forced people to live up to their BS. He would do stuff like, I can tell this tale because his sister's dead now. He so many times would go over there and force his sister to do the right thing after all her crazy automobile accidents and fights with this cousin and drunken hijinks with this. He would go over like a boss and say, no, we're doing this. And he would just solve it. And he would tell her, and not just her, his own father, many members of his own family. My father was the one, I always said he was the one that made everybody do right. And when he died, I kind of took over that slot in our family. And he wasn't always liked for that. I'm not always liked for that. And I'm fine with that because there has to be at least one person in the family saying, hey, no, this is wrong. And I think looking at shiny, happy people, that Jill Duggar Dillard is that person. Jill is the truth teller. And for that, I was glad to see the documentary because every family has one, and every family tries to demonize that person, tries to gaslight the hell out of them. Well, that person is saying, no, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is vanilla wrong, this is just wrong. So I feel bad for Jill that she's in that position because it's not a comfortable place to be in a family. To be the only one willing to stand up and say, yes, that's wrong. It's not a fun place to be. And that is all the rambling I have to do today on muscle relaxers because they found out I was having problems with my arms for the last 3 weeks. I have pulled back muscle on top of everything else, but I'm doing so much better now. My knees are much better. I figured out what this was. Got the stitches taken out. Not a full rip of my earlobe and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm healing. My hands don't even look like they're all torn to hell and back. They're doing much better. A little bag balm on them did the works. So you guys figure out where your boundaries are. Figure out who you're listening to. And if it's somebody who's relentlessly negative all the time, like this person we're talking about, Lori Alexander, you might want to find a better person to listen to. I kind of laughed because I saw that Lori and Ken were fighting with Elizabeth Prada. And I don't always like her either. Sometimes I think she misses the mark. But I think she is a lot less toxic than the two of them. And that's what it's all about in our faith walks. We have to figure out what works for us. For me right now, it's the red letters. I'm looking at what Jesus said and what Jesus did, and I'm looking at a few other things, but I'm also looking at scripture and context. Looking of the context of how it was said, why it was said, who said it. If you look at all of that, then yes, you could look at the sufficiency of the entire scripture. But when you look at the scripture and you read your little phrase and you take it out of context and you don't consider the other things, you can end up playing biblical twister and end up really tied up in knots until you're kind of crushed at the bottom, figuring out what in the hell just happened to me. Okay, you guys, I love you. I'm sorry that this is another one of those uploads, but I'm still working on trying to get my new camera set up and to get my computer set and all that. And it's going to take me a hot second because I got physical needs right now. Okay, so I'll be back on Tuesday. It's going to go back to Tuesdays and Fridays at 10 a.m., whether I have to do an upload or whether I can actually do a live. I hope to be able to do live soon. And I might just start using my iPad for that and going in the living room from now on because I know you guys are sick to death of looking at my bedroom. I am too.